In the sprawling neon-lit markets of Dervik V, the air was thick with the aroma of exotic spices and the buzz of alien dialects. The marketplace, a hub of interstellar trade, was alive with beings from across the galaxy bartering, scheming, and hustling. Among them moved Cale Morris, a lone human with a roughened exterior, marked by scars and stories. Cale was no ordinary man. He was a former pilot of the Earth Coalition, his service medals long since pawned for a life of mercenary work. It was more than just a job, it was his survival. Tall, with an imposing figure, Cale's presence commanded attention, yet his eyes, sharp and observant, betrayed nothing of his intentions. On Dervik V, information was as valuable as the rarest mineral, and Cale had become adept at navigating the underworld's currents. He wore a worn leather jacket, its pockets secretly lined with tools of the trade, encrypted data pads, a compact blaster, and a variety of forged identities. As he pushed through the crowd, his hand rested casually near the blaster, a silent reminder of his readiness for trouble. Cale's reputation had spread far. Known for his daring exploits and unwavering nerve, he was a man who could be trusted to get the job done, no matter the stakes. This evening, however, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the bustling market, his mission was personal. He stopped at a stall selling mechanical parts, a cover for the real trade in information and illegal tech. The vendor, a greasy-skinned Gralloch with eyes too many for comfort, nodded at Cale's approach. "Morris," the Gralloch hissed, his voice a sibilant whisper. "Heard you're looking for something explosive." "Information," Cale corrected smoothly, his voice low and even. "Something big enough to shake the stars." The Gralloch chuckled, a sound like grinding gears. "Always playing with fire, aren't you, human? What's your price?" Cale leaned in, his gaze steady. "What have you got?" After a tense moment, the vendor pulled out a small, encrypted data chip and slid it across the counter. "Heard a rumor about the Zyther Empire," he murmured. "They've got a new toy, something big, calls itself the Void Seraph. Floating fortress, armed to the teeth with tech not even the Coalition's seen." Interest piqued, Cale's hand shot out, snatching the chip before anyone else noticed. He flipped a few cred chips to the vendor, a fair price for such a tantalizing lead. As Cale turned away, the data chip hidden safely in his pocket, his mind raced with possibilities. The Void Seraph could be the score of a lifetime, a job that could set him up for good, or get him killed. But first, he needed a crew, one as daring and desperate as he was. With a new purpose, Cale disappeared into the shadows of Dervik V, the neon lights flickering in his determined eyes. The game was on, and he was playing for the highest stakes yet. Back in the dimly lit confines of his small, cluttered apartment situated in a less reputable sector of Dervik V, Cale Morris slotted the encrypted data chip into his holoprojector. The device whirred softly, casting a holographic display in the center of the room. Data streamed rapidly across the projection, schematics, guard rotations, and, most importantly, details about the Void Seraph, the Zyther Empire's latest feat in military engineering. The Battlestation was a behemoth, constructed from alloys unknown to human metallurgy, making it nearly indestructible. It was armed with quantum blasters capable of vaporizing spacecraft before they could even get within firing range, and shielded by an electromagnetic barrier that could deflect any known weapons system. The very idea that such a fortress could be infiltrated, let alone commandeered, seemed ludicrous. Yet, as Cale's eyes absorbed every byte of information, a plan began to crystallize in his mind. The data also included disturbing intelligence about the station's purpose. The Zyther Empire, a reclusive and highly militaristic civilization, had designed the Void Seraph not just as a deterrent, but as a spearhead for an aggressive expansion into neutral territories uncomfortably close to Coalition space. If the Zyther were to deploy the Battlestation, it would shift the delicate balance of power and could ignite a war that would envelop countless systems. Sitting back, Cale rubbed his chin thoughtfully. The stakes were higher than he initially realized. This wasn't just any other heist, it was a mission with potential galactic consequences. As risky as it was, stopping the Zyther could mean preventing a war. More pragmatically, it could also mean a hefty reward from grateful governments and shadowy benefactors alike. He stood up decisively, the plan taking shape. To pull this off, he'd need a crew. Not just any crew, but specialists, each an expert in their field. He started compiling a list, his mind running through contacts and old comrades. First, there was Lyra Thorne, a former tech operative from the Cygnus systems and one of the best hackers in the known galaxy. She had gone into hiding after a botched job on a corporate satellite that left her with a sizable bounty on her head. Cale knew she'd be interested in the challenge, and the chance to clear her slate with the money they'd make. Next, he considered Gron Veers, an ex-military commando from the Oxenoid colonies. Gron had the brawn and military tactics needed to subdue the station's guards without raising an alarm. His last stint with Cale had ended with the Oxenoids saving his life. There was a debt there, and Cale knew Gron would answer the call. Lastly, there was Zin Kiru, an enigmatic figure, rare even among her spectral species, known for their ability to blend into shadows. As a shadow being, Zin was invaluable for stealth and reconnaissance. She was a ghost, perfect for slipping past sensors and cameras undetected. With his team in mind, Cale set about contacting them through secure channels, his messages encrypted and sent across the dark waves of the interstellar net. One by one, the responses came in, their affirmatives interlaced with static, each member intrigued by the audacity of the plan and the payout it promised. As he waited for his newly formed crew to arrive, Cale began to gather equipment and supplies. He acquired weapons modified to disrupt Zyther technology, cloaking devices to mask their heat signatures, and hacking modules capable of interfacing with alien systems. Every item was selected with precision, every strategy meticulously planned. Days later, as Cale watched the silhouettes of 3 ships descending against the backdrop of Dervik V's twin suns, he felt a surge of adrenaline. The pieces were coming together, each moving part converging to form the intricate machinery of their heist. This was more than a daring plan, it was a chance to write history, if they survived. The crew assembled in Cale's apartment, each person carrying their own reasons for being there, their own hopes pinned to the mission's success. As they gathered around the holoprojector, the Void Seraph looming ominously before them, Cale outlined the plan. Every phase, every contingency, every potential pitfall was laid bare. "We're not just stealing a battle station," Cale concluded, locking eyes with each of his crew members. "We're preventing a war. We're becoming legends." The team nodded, their faces set with determination. They were ready. The mission was set. The stakes were unimaginable. But together, they were about to attempt the impossible. Cale Morris watched the final ship touch down on the dusty outskirts of Dervik V, its engines humming softly in the twilight. The meeting point was an abandoned warehouse, far from prying eyes and government oversight. This location, known only to the most clandestine circles, was perfect for what was essentially the assembly of one of the most daring crews in the galaxy. One by one, the members of his newly formed team made their way into the dimly lit interior, their silhouettes briefly highlighted by the slivers of setting sun filtering through the cracks in the walls. Each arrival was a testament to Cale's influence and reputation. He greeted them not with handshakes but with a nod, subtle acknowledgement of their shared purpose. Lyra Thorne was the first to arrive. Her appearance was as unassuming as her reputation was not. Small and lithe, her movements were calculated, a reminder of her days dodging security systems and hacking into some of the most secure networks in the galaxy. Her eyes, bright and alert, scanned the room, taking in every exit and entry point, a habit born from years of evading bounty hunters. She approached Cale with a smirk. "Cale, this had better be worth my time," she said, her voice a mix of amusement and challenge. "It will be," Cale assured her, handing her a data pad loaded with technical blueprints of the Void Seraph. "We need your skills to crack the hardest security the Zyther have. Interested?" Her eyes lit up at the challenge. "You know I can't resist a good puzzle," she replied, already absorbed in the data. Next to arrive was Gron Veers, whose towering presence was almost enough to dim the weak lights further. The Oxenoid's frame was built like the armored vehicles of his home world, and his face bore the stoic calm of a seasoned warrior. His handshake with Kale was brief, the mutual respect between them needing no words. "I left a comfortable job for this, Kale," Gron rumbled, his voice deep and resonant. "I hope your plan is as solid as you claim." Kale clapped him on the shoulder. "It's solid, and with your help, it'll be foolproof." Finally, Xin Karu drifted in, her form shimmering slightly as she moved from shadow to shadow, her presence almost ghost-like. The others might have missed her arrival had Kale not directed their attention to her. Xin was a shadow being, capable of manipulating light around her to become nearly invisible. She spoke rarely, but when she did, her words were worth listening to. "We're all here for a reason," she whispered, her voice barely above the hum of the warehouse. "I trust you have a plan that utilizes my unique talents?" Kale nodded, acknowledging each of his crew members. "Each of you has been chosen not just for your skills but for your courage. The Void Seraph is unlike anything we've encountered. But with your combined abilities, we can pull this off." He laid out the plan in detail, using the warehouse's old holoprojector to display schematics and simulations of their approach. They would approach the Void Seraph on their stealth, using a modified freighter to blend in with the other logistic vessels that routinely approached the battle station. Lyra would be the first to act, disabling the external sensors and communications to isolate the station. Meanwhile, Gron's task was to secure the docking bay and neutralize any immediate threats, ensuring they had a safe entry and exit point. Xin would infiltrate the security command center, using her abilities to avoid detection and, if necessary, disable internal defenses. As Kale outlined each phase, he watched his team closely, gauging their reactions and adjusting his explanations to their unspoken concerns. Their faces, each marked by different histories and haunted by different demons, now shared a common expression: determination. When the briefing was over, the team spent the rest of the evening refining the plan, Lyra suggesting a backup system for her hacks, Gron discussing contingency tactics in case of heavy resistance, and Xin mapping out her path through the station's shadows. The meeting stretched into the night, the warehouse filled with the low murmur of tactical discussions and the occasional clatter of equipment being tested. By the time the first rays of dawn began to seep through the gaps in the walls, a palpable sense of unity had formed among the team. They were no longer just individuals, they were a crew with a purpose. As they parted ways to prepare for the mission, Kale felt a surge of pride. This was more than just a heist. They were about to embark on a mission that could very well change the balance of power in the galaxy. And with this team, Kale believed they could actually pull it off. The early hours before dawn were shrouded in a tense silence as the crew prepared for departure. Their ship, a nondescript freighter retrofitted with stealth technology and forged credentials, hovered quietly in the shadow of an asteroid cluster near the Xyther-controlled region. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with a focused energy as Kale Morris reviewed the final details of their plan. "This is it," Kale announced, his voice steady and commanding over the ship's comm system. "Everyone knows their role. Stick to the plan, watch each other's backs, and we'll get through this." Lyra Thorne sat at the communications console, her fingers flying over the holographic displays as she set up the last of her encryption bypasses. "Sensors and comms are isolated," she confirmed, a hint of excitement in her tone. "We're a ghost on their system." Gron Veers checked his gear, his large hands expertly securing non-lethal stun grenades to his belt. "Ready to persuade anyone who gets in our way," he grunted, his tone half-joking. Xin Karu, almost blending into the dim lighting of the ship, nodded silently, her presence felt rather than seen. Her tools were different, a compact set of electronic jammers and a thin blade of hardened light, should things require a silent but deadly approach. As the ship approached the Void Seraph, the sheer scale of the battle station became oppressively apparent. It loomed like a small moon, its surface bristling with weaponry and sensor arrays, a fortress designed to be impregnable. Approaching the docking bay, Kale murmured, guiding the freighter with practiced ease. "Lyra, you're up." With a few swift keystrokes, Lyra jammed the docking protocol, forcing the station's systems to default to manual override. "Docking sequence is ours," she reported, her voice laced with triumph. "They're blind to us for now." The freighter slipped into the docking bay, the vast doors closing silently behind them. The bay was starkly illuminated by artificial light, casting long, harsh shadows across the empty space. It was eerily silent, the calm before the storm. Gron was the first out, his heavy boots thudding softly on the metal deck. His scanners flicked around the area, picking up no immediate threats. "Area secure," he confirmed, signaling the rest to follow. The crew moved quickly, their movements precise and coordinated. Xin vanished into the shadows, her form flickering as she activated her stealth field. She was a whisper, a ghost heading to disable the internal security grid. Meanwhile, Kale and Lyra made their way to the central command hub. The corridors were a labyrinth of sleek, alien design, their walls humming with the quiet power of the battle station. Every turn they took was calculated, every step measured to avoid detection. As they neared the hub, an unexpected challenge arose, a security detail unexpectedly crossing their path. Kale tensed, readying for a confrontation, but Gron was faster. Moving with a speed that belied his size, he deployed a stun grenade, the burst of energy knocking the guards unconscious before they could raise the alarm. "Nice save," Kale whispered, clapping Gron on the shoulder as they quickly moved past the downed guards. In the security command center, Xin was a blend of shadow and silence, her tools interfacing with the station's systems. With delicate precision, she bypassed the security protocols, shutting down alarms and looping surveillance feeds. "Security systems are down," her voice crackled over the comms. "You're clear to proceed." Back in the central hub, Kale and Lyra reached the mainframe, the heart of the Void Seraph. Lyra's hands were a blur as she interfaced her device with the alien technology. Data streamed across her screen, a symphony of code and countermeasures. "It's complex, but nothing I can't handle," Lyra muttered, her focus absolute as she navigated through the network. Almost there. Finally, with a triumphant click, the mainframe capitulated, surrendering its control to her. "We have control of the battle station," she breathed, a mix of relief and disbelief in her voice. Kale allowed himself a moment of triumph, watching as the command screens shifted to display their own ship's insignia. "Excellent work. Gron, Xin, rendezvous at the escape route. It's time to get out of here." As they retraced their steps, the weight of what they had accomplished began to settle in. They had infiltrated one of the most secure facilities in the galaxy, commandeered a battle station, and were about to escape without a trace. The crew converged at the docking bay, where their ship awaited, ready to depart. But just as they were about to board, alarms blared, a stark, wailing signal that pierced the silence. They had been discovered. "Move!" Kale shouted, as they dashed towards the ship, the doors of the bay beginning to close as the security systems came back online. It was a race against time, a desperate sprint for freedom as the Void Seraph awoke from its forced slumber, its systems coming alive to hunt the intruders within its walls. As the alarms of the Void Seraph blared through the echoing metal corridors, a chilling sense of urgency swept over Kale and his team. The lights switched abruptly from their usual steady glow to a pulsating red, casting ominous shadows that danced along the walls. They raced towards the ship, each step amplified by the ringing echoes of their footsteps and the distant, mechanical whirs of the battle station coming to life. Kale led the charge, with Lyra right behind him, clutching the portable drive that now contained critical override codes. Gron's heavy boots thudded rhythmically against the steel floor, a stark contrast to the nearly silent, swift movements of Xin, who flitted between shadows, her form barely visible. The distance to their ship seemed to stretch endlessly, a cruel trick of perspective in their heightened state of alert. As they neared the docking bay, a squadron of Zither guards, tall, imposing figures clad in reflective armor, blocked their path. Their weapons, unlike any seen in human conflicts, hummed with an eerie energy, ready to unleash devastation. Kale knew they couldn't afford a direct confrontation, not when they were so close. "Gron, we need a diversion," Kale barked over the sound of alarms. Gron nodded, understanding instantly. He veered left, drawing the attention of the guards with a barrage of stun grenades. The grenades erupted into blinding flashes of light and disorienting roars of sound, scattering the Zither guards in momentary confusion and chaos. taking advantage of the diversion, Kale, Lyra, and Zin darted towards a secondary corridor, one that Zin had scouted earlier. The corridor was less frequented, giving them a fleeting chance of reaching the docking bay without further encounters. As they ran, Lyra updated their ship's AI remotely, preparing it for an immediate departure. "We're almost there," Lyra shouted, her voice laced with a mix of hope and desperation. Just then, a sharp, sizzling sound whizzed past them, energy bolts fired by pursuing Xyther guards who had recovered quicker than expected. The crew ducked and weaved, their bodies adrenaline-fueled and primed for survival. Reaching the docking bay, they found the doors beginning to close, an automatic security measure triggered by the station's lockdown protocol. The gap was rapidly narrowing, a shrinking gateway to their only escape route. "Zin, now!" Kale yelled, signaling her to use one of her rare and energy-draining abilities. Concentrating intensely, Zin extended her hands towards the closing doors. Her body shimmered with a spectral light as she manipulated the shadows to jam the doors temporarily, halting their progress with mere inches to spare. With no time to lose, the team slipped through the narrow opening, one by one, squeezing through the tight space. Once inside, they rushed to their ship, docked and waiting like a loyal beast of burden. Kale jumped into the pilot's seat, firing up the engines, which roared to life with a promising thrum. Lyra, still clutching the drive, quickly interfaced it with the ship's navigation system. "Coordinates for the jump are set. We can't let them track us through hyperspace," she said, programming a randomized, convoluted path that would lose any pursuers in the maze-like clusters of nearby star systems. As Kale maneuvered the ship out of the docking bay, Gron secured the entry points, sealing the doors with a welding torch to delay any potential boarding attempts. The ship shuddered as it cleared the Void Seraph's gravitational pull, the massive battle station looming large in their rearview screens. Once clear, Kale didn't hesitate, he slammed the hyperspace lever forward. Space stretched before them in a dizzying display of light and color as they entered hyperspace, the stars elongating into lines that zipped past the viewport. In the relative safety of hyperspace, the team gathered in the cockpit, their faces reflecting a mix of relief and exhaustion. They had done it, they had stolen a battle station from the formidable Xyther Empire, a feat that would go down in history. But the immediate danger was not over, they had to ensure they weren't followed, and that the Xyther couldn't retaliate. Kale turned to his crew, a serious yet proud look on his face. "We're not out of this yet, but thanks to each of you, we've got a fighting chance. Let's lay low, make sure we lose any tail, and then plan our next move. This battle station isn't just a prize, it's a responsibility." The crew nodded, each processing the weight of their actions in their own way. They had entered the annals of cosmic legends, but the journey was far from over. As they hurtled through hyperspace, the Void Seraph's blueprints and secrets in their possession, they were aware that the real challenge was just beginning, to hide, to strategize, and to decide the fate of a weapon powerful enough to shift the balance of power in the galaxy. The crew of the commandeered battle station, now hurtling through the depths of uncharted space, faced a new reality. As the adrenaline of the heist waned, the magnitude of their actions settled in, bringing with it a heavy silence that filled the ship. Kale Morris stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the star-studded blackness ahead, deep in thought about their next moves. The Void Seraph, an alien fortress now under human command, offered unimaginable power and equally unimaginable risks. Lyra Thorne, stationed at her console, monitored the encrypted channels, scanning for any hint of pursuit. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface, her brow furrowed in concentration. "No signs of a tail," she announced periodically, her voice cutting through the quiet like a knife. The stealth technology she'd rigged was holding, for now. Granviers was busy in the lower deck, ensuring that all weapon systems were primed and ready should they need to defend themselves. The ship's vast arsenal was unfamiliar and daunting, yet Gron's experience with military tech allowed him to adapt quickly. Each weapon system he activated hummed with potential, a reminder of the battle station's designed purpose. Zin Kiru explored the deeper corridors of the Seraph, her shadowy form melding with the dimly lit passageways. She was searching for any hidden systems or traps that the Xythers might have left behind, knowing their reputation for cunning engineering. Her silent sweeps were thorough, leaving no stone unturned, no shadow unchecked. In the main conference room, Kale convened a meeting to discuss their strategy. The holographic projector illuminated his stern features as he addressed his small but capable crew. "We have control of the Seraph, but we need to decide what to do with it. This isn't just about escape anymore. We hold a power that could tip the balance of the galaxy, and we need to handle it responsibly." Lyra chimed in, her tone serious. "We could dismantle it, sell off parts and tech. It would fetch a fortune and scatter the power rather than concentrate it." Gron shook his head, his voice rumbling deep from his chest. "Too risky. Parts could end up in the wrong hands, leading to more weapons, more wars. We might be better off keeping it intact, using it as a deterrent." Zen, usually reserved, offered a different perspective. "There are those who would seek this power for themselves, and they won't stop until they get it. Perhaps we should consider aligning with a faction, offering them the Seraph's capabilities in exchange for protection." The debate was heated, each member passionate about their views. Kale listened, weighing each argument. The decision was monumental, affecting countless lives beyond their own. As captain, the final call was his to make, and the burden weighed heavily on him. After hours of discussion, a compromise began to form. They would use the Seraph as a mobile base, operating under strict secrecy. They would offer aid where it was needed, intervening in conflicts that threatened stability or oppressed innocence. They would be guardians, not conquerors, leveraging their newfound power to foster peace rather than war. The decision made, the next task was to secure their operation. Lyra set up a network of false leads and encrypted signals to mask their movements. Gron and Zen worked together to fortify the Seraph's defenses, turning it into a bastion against both physical and cyber attacks. As they prepared, an unexpected message arrived. It was a distress call, faint and crackling with static, emanating from a nearby system where a civil war threatened to tear the local society apart. The rebels, fighting against a tyrannical regime, were on the brink of defeat. Kale looked to his crew, his decision clear. "This is our first mission. We intervene, we save lives, we start as we mean to go on." With a new sense of purpose, the crew rallied. They set a course for the troubled system, the Seraph cloaked and silent against the backdrop of space. As they approached, they planned their intervention, non-lethal, aimed at disabling the oppressive regime's capability to harm its own people without taking lives. The battle was swift and decisive. The Seraph's advanced systems disabled the regime's war machines, leaving them in disarray without causing a single casualty. The rebels, amazed and grateful, celebrated as tyrants surrendered, their rule overthrown without bloodshed. Back aboard the Seraph, the crew watched the celebrations from afar, a sense of accomplishment filling the room. They had turned the tide of a war, saved countless lives, and in doing so, had found their calling. Kale allowed himself a small smile. They were no longer just thieves or mercenaries. They were peacemakers, holding a weapon of mass destruction and choosing to use it for good. As they set their sights on their next mission, the galaxy seemed a little less dark, a little more hopeful, thanks to the guardians of the Void Seraph. With the Void Seraph's intervention leading to a swift and decisive victory for the beleaguered rebels, Kale and his crew had now solidified their new role as unexpected guardians in the cosmos. Yet, as the celebrations unfolded far below on the surface of the troubled world they had just aided, the stark reality of their situation pressed upon them. Their position was perilous, and their anonymity might soon be compromised. As Kale steered the Void Seraph away from the grateful cheers of liberated citizens, he knew they had to disappear before any of the galaxy's major powers could pinpoint their location. "Lyra, initiate cloaking procedures and prepare to jump to hyperspace. We can't afford to stick around," he ordered, his voice steady but underscored with urgency. Lyra nodded, her fingers moving deftly across her console. "Cloaking engaged. Setting random jump coordinates now." The Battlestation, its outer shell flickering as the cloaking devices whirred to life, began to fade against the backdrop of space, becoming nothing more than a whisper of its former ominous silhouette. Gron, ever vigilant, monitor the ship's defensive systems. We should assume they'll try to track us. I've set up multiple decoy signals to scatter if anyone attempts a lock, he stated, adjusting the settings on his console. Zen, who had taken to quietly patrolling the corridors, ensuring no residual tracking devices or bugs had been planted during their brief interaction with the planet's surface, added, I found nothing on my sweeps, but we should keep scanning. Caution will keep us alive. The tension was palpable as the Battlestation, now hidden from sight, shot through the galaxy. The stars blurred into lines of light as the hyperdrive engaged, propelling them into the safety of hyperspace. Inside the ship, the crew moved about their tasks with a practiced efficiency born of necessity and newly forged trust. Once safely in hyperspace, Kale convened a meeting in the main conference room. We need to talk about our long-term viability. Our intervention today was a success, but it's highlighted just how exposed we are each time we engage. Lyra chimed in, we could enhance our stealth systems further, but it's costly and resource-intensive. We might need to consider finding a safe haven, a base of operations where we can manage these risks better. Gron looked thoughtful. A base is a good idea, but it has to be somewhere off the grid. An uncharted system, perhaps, where we can set up defenses and maybe even a few automated early warning systems. Zin suggested, what about aligning with a discreet, technologically advanced ally? Someone who understands the importance of secrecy and has the resources to help us maintain it. The discussion went deep into the cycle, each member bringing their expertise to the table, weaving a complex tapestry of strategy and foresight. They debated potential allies and suitable locations, each option weighed against their ethos of maintaining peace without becoming tyrants themselves. As the debate drew to a close, Kale summarized their action plan. We'll start scouting for a suitable base while continuing our missions. Lyra, keep us off the grid. Gron, work on fortifying our defenses. Zin, you'll handle reconnaissance. We have to be smart, fast, and invisible. The crew dispersed to their respective duties, each member invigorated by the sense of purpose that had evolved from their daring escapade. As Kale returned to the helm, his eyes on the vast starscape before him, he felt the weight of their choices. They were not merely outlaws now, they were pioneers on a new frontier of cosmic justice. The challenges they faced were enormous, yet the potential to effect real change across the galaxy was a powerful motivator. Each star, each planet they passed held the possibility of new allies, new adversaries, and new adventures. As the Void Seraph sailed through the unknown, its crew worked tirelessly to build their legacy, a legacy of peace forged from a weapon of war. Kale knew the road ahead would be fraught with danger, but he also knew they had the resolve to face whatever came their way. The galaxy was vast, and its needs were great. For Kale and his crew aboard the Void Seraph, the mission had just begun. Each system they navigated, each conflict they diffused, and each life they saved brought them closer to understanding their role in this sprawling universe, and understanding that they were not just survivors or thieves, but protectors on a cosmic scale. After weeks of traveling through hyperspace, the Void Seraph finally emerged in a distant, uncharted part of the galaxy, a sector devoid of established trade routes and far from the prying sensors of the major galactic powers. This remote location presented the perfect canvas on which Kale and his crew could establish their new base of operations, a sanctuary from which they could plan their future endeavors and safeguard the incredible power at their disposal. The star system they chose was veiled by a dense nebula, offering natural concealment and a strategic advantage over anyone who might stumble upon their hideout. The primary planet within the system was a barren, rocky world, unwelcoming and harsh, but beneath its surface lay vast cave systems that could serve as protective hangars for the Seraph and a labyrinthine base for the crew. Kale stood on the command bridge, surveying the holographic scans of the planet. It's perfect, he declared with a determined nod. Gron, Lyra, prepare for surface reconnaissance. We need to make sure it's as secure as it appears. Gron and Lyra geared up for the mission, their suits equipped with advanced life support systems and environmental shields, suitable for the planet's extreme conditions. They disembarked in a smaller shuttle, designed for close planetary exploration, leaving Kale and Zin to monitor from orbit. As they explored the cavernous expanse beneath the planet's surface, Lyra transmitted live data back to the Seraph. The caves are extensive and stable. With some modifications, they could serve not just as a hideout but as a fortress, she reported, her voice echoing slightly through the comms. Meanwhile, Kale and Zinn used this time to strengthen the Seraph's defensive systems and refine their operational protocols. Zinn, ever vigilant, patrolled the corridors of the Seraph, setting up security measures that integrated her unique capabilities to manipulate light and shadow, creating optical illusions that could disorient any unwanted visitors. Days turned into weeks as the crew worked tirelessly to transform the caves into a habitable base. Using high-tech construction drones and the Seraph's advanced fabrication capabilities, they carved out living quarters, a command center, and secure docks for their ships. Gron took charge of the physical defenses, installing automated turrets and shield generators at strategic points throughout the caverns. As the base took shape, Kale initiated contact with various discrete, potential allies across the galaxy, using encrypted channels to discuss alliances that could benefit their cause. These allies ranged from other small, independent factions seeking peace and stability, to clandestine groups within larger political entities who shared their vision of a balanced galaxy. One such ally was an enigmatic group known only as the Harbingers of Tranquility, a coalition of several alien races who had also grown weary of the constant power struggles that plagued the galaxy. Their technology was complementary to the systems aboard the Seraph, and they shared a philosophy of proactive, peaceful intervention. The Harbingers were skilled in diplomacy and espionage, and they offered intelligence and political support in exchange for the occasional use of the Seraph's might to enforce peace where diplomacy failed. This alliance proved beneficial, expanding the crew's operational reach and providing them with critical updates on galactic developments. Lyra set up a secure communication network that linked them with their allies without revealing their location. She managed this network from a new control room within the base, her consoles and screens forming a semicircle around her, giving her a panoramic view of their digital domain. With the base established and alliances forming, Kale called a meeting to discuss their first official mission as Guardians from their new home. The team gathered around the main holographic table, which displayed a live map of the galaxy, marked with hotspots of conflict and distress calls. Our focus is on these regions, Kale pointed out, indicating several areas where tyranny, piracy, or violent conflict was disrupting local communities. We have the means to make a difference here. We'll offer support where we can, disrupt aggressors where necessary, and use our influence to foster peace. The crew listened intently, each member aware of the gravity of their responsibilities. They were no longer just survivors navigating the fringes of space, they were now a force for good, wielding the power of one of the most advanced war machines ever constructed to create a legacy of peace. As they embarked on this new chapter, the Void Seraph not only symbolized a weapon of immense power but also a beacon of hope for those living in the shadow of oppression. Kale, with his capable crew by his side, felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had come far from their days as fugitives and mercenaries. Now, they were protectors, guardians of peace in a galaxy that desperately needed it. Their journey had transformed them, and in turn, they would use their newfound power to transform the galaxy. The Void Seraph had become more than a mere battle station, it was a symbol of hope and a testament to the courage and audacity of those who dared to challenge the status quo. Nestled deep within the hidden recesses of the uncharted star system, the Battlestation served as the headquarters for what had become a formidable force for galactic peace. Kale Morris, once a mere mercenary, now found himself at the helm of a movement. In the command center of the Seraph, the walls lined with monitors and data streams, Kale reviewed the latest reports from across the galaxy. Each screen flickered with images of planets where their interventions had halted wars, thwarted genocides, and toppled tyrants. The responsibility was immense, but so was the crew's commitment to their cause. Lyra Thorne, now effectively the chief intelligence officer, coordinated a network of informants and allies, ensuring that the Seraph was always one step ahead of those who would seek to sow chaos. Her expertise in surveillance and cyber warfare had turned their operations into a ghost legend, heard of but never seen, and impossible to trace. Gron Veers oversaw training for the Seraph's rapidly growing security force, made up of volunteers from the worlds they had aided. These men and women were loyal, not just to the crew but to the ideal of a galaxy where might did not make right. Gron's training programs were rigorous, combining physical prowess with a strong ethical foundation, ensuring that their peacekeeping missions remained non-lethal and just. Xin Kiru, the enigmatic shadow being, had become something of a folk hero among the darker corners of the galaxy. Her ability to infiltrate and disable enemy operations without a single casualty had saved countless lives. Her tales were whispered across spaceports and in the back alleys of 100 worlds, inspiring others to take up the mantle of stealth and subtlety in their own fights for justice. The success of their operations attracted the attention of various galactic councils and minor empires, some seeking to ally with the Seraph, others viewing it as a threat to their own power. Kale navigated these political waters with a deft touch, leveraging their military might for diplomatic clout, always aiming to de-escalate conflicts rather than dominating them. One such negotiation brought them face-to-face with representatives from the Coryllan system, a small empire that had been aggressively expanding its territory. The diplomats, accustomed to dealing with fear and submission, were unprepared for Kale's blend of stern resolve and honest broker. During the tense negotiations, Kale laid out the Seraph's mission clearly: we are not conquerors, nor are we here to tip the scales to anyone's favor unjustly. Our goal is simple: stability and peace. You can join us in this effort, or you can remain on the sidelines. But make no mistake, we will intervene if your actions threaten the innocent. The diplomats left with much to consider, but the encounter solidified the Seraph's reputation as a powerful independent entity in the galactic scene, one that could not be ignored or easily dismissed. Back at their base, the crew gathered to celebrate their first anniversary since commandeering the Seraph. The cavernous hall they used for such occasions was filled with laughter and stories, a stark contrast to the weapon-laden corridors it once held. Representatives from the worlds they had helped joined them, sharing their stories of how the Seraph's interventions had changed their lives. As Kale listened to the stories, he felt a profound sense of accomplishment and purpose. He had started this journey as a rogue, a mercenary with no cause greater than his next paycheck. Now, he was part of something greater, a leader in a campaign for peace. The work we do might never be finished, Kale addressed his crew and their guests, his voice echoing slightly in the vast chamber. There will always be those who seek power at the expense of others. But as long as there are those who need us, who call out for help, we will answer. We are the keepers of peace, the guardians of the helpless. We are the legacy we choose to create. The applause was thunderous, resonating through the halls of the Seraph, echoing off the metal and stone. As the celebrations continued, Kale stepped away for a moment, looking out into the stars through one of the Seraph's many viewports. The galaxy was vast, and their journey was just beginning, but Kale Morris was ready. With his crew beside him, and the Void Seraph at their command, they would continue to forge a legacy of peace and justice, one mission at a time.